Welcome to GamesReport, where I give a report on the games I've played. The game that's up for discussion today is Final Fantasy Adventures, or better known by its alter ego, Seiken Densetsu, or Mystic Quest. Final Fantasy Adventure is a top-down action-adventure role-playing game in the Mana series, developed and published by Square in 1991 for the Game Boy, which is now better known as Square Enix. Before I dive deeper into the game, despite this game sharing the Final Fantasy name, it does not have any relations to the actual Final Fantasy games, and it has since evolved into its own IP. Up first, story. In the Nintendo Switch version, you have the option of naming the character you're playing as well as a female character. However, in the original games, you play as a character named Sumo and the girl is named Fuji. The story starts off as you, Sumo, as a gladiator, fighting for the entertainment of the Dark Lord. However, one day you escape and overheard the conversations between the Dark Lord and Julius, his partner, talking about harnessing the power of mana. But they noticed you and knocked you off a waterfall. You survived because of plot armor, strong willpower and tenacity. Upon waking up, you discover a dying man who would be known as Hasim, the current last Gemonite. He asks you to rescue a damsel in distress from monsters. You save her and realize both of you hate the Dark Lord, so you teamed up with her. That girl is named Fuji. Remember that name because you'll be saving her a lot in this game, and knowing that name would give you a target to curse to. You later learn that the power of mana derives from the Tree of Mana, and during the earlier days, Gemonites were tasked to protect the Tree of Mana. But as the current Gemonite, Hasim, has already died, and Bogart, the last of the Gemonites, is now too frail to stop the Dark Lord, he appoints you as the new Gemonite and asks you and Fuji to look for Siba in Wendell to find out more information on stopping the Dark Lord. Once there, you learn that Fuji is a descendant from the Mana family, who created the Tree of Mana. So now as the Gemonite, you have to protect her from the Dark Lord, whilst collecting key items that will aid you in stopping the Dark Lord. Next up, gameplay. The combat is similar to that of the old Game Boy Zelda games, where you're limited to the up-down, left-right movements, and moving from grid to grid on the map. The game has very interesting parts, but some parts that definitely did not age well, so this section will be split up between those 2 points. Firstly, at the bottom of the screen you have an ultimate bar. Once full, pressing the attack button will perform a special move that does increased damage and has a new animation. For the sword, it's to fly through the air and back like a boomerang. You also have a wide variety of weapons to choose from, ranging from swords, axes, and spears amongst others, as well as magic, in the forms of fireball, healing spells, and even a nuke. Again, amongst others. Yes, a nuke is a magical skill here. These provide the freedom of choice for the player. However, certain enemies can only be affected by certain weapons, so this contradicts whatever good points it had. You also have companions that will join you from area to area, each with their own unique special skills that you can spam. Fuji, for example, heals you, and this character called Lester straight up just changes the soundtrack. Of course, some are more useful than others. Moving on to enemies, you'll be fighting normal enemies and bosses. There's not much to be said from normal enemies. All enemies in this game stick to their own attack pattern. But here's where I find the combat to be more interesting. There are a lot of boss fights in this game, and there are some that are very challenging. One such was this wizard boss. I spent 40 minutes fighting this boss again and again, only to die for the umpteenth time again. It wasn't until I stopped and really analysed his attack patterns that I managed to kill the boss without taking a single hit. The sense of achievement that I got from killing the boss is something I'll always remember. With that said, some bosses are just terrible, especially those that requires you to use a certain weapon, say a sword. And due to its limited range, you are just forced to wait for the boss to come into range with you before you can cheese your way through the fight by standing in a certain spot where the boss just can't reach you and spam the attack button. By the way, the Dark Lord, a complete joke. Even the first boss proved more of a challenge than him. You can also find some hidden sparkles that boost your stats by exploring on the map, but to find those, you have to walk around and follow the tiles on the ground, which makes you feel like you're walking in quicksand. This game mechanic is a very old school gimmick. There's a way for the developers to hint to players as to where secret items or Easter eggs are hidden. And to be honest, I don't know why so many games completely eradicated these mechanics from the last 2 decades. Now this is possibly my biggest gripe with the game, the map. No. Dora, just no. Sadly, this will be what drives most players away from this game. When you load up the map, it is just grids with a few occasional landmarks for shops or inns. Your map of this game is your ability to actually listen through what the NPCs have to say. Certain areas can only be accessed by using certain weapons, like an axe to cut down trees, or the item Mattock, which is essentially just a pickaxe to mine down walls in the caves. However, these trees and walls looks exactly the same as any other trees or walls. At least for walls in the caves, you can usually guess which is the wall you need to take down, because the entrance is always in the dead center of the wall. One task I remember straight up asked you to go to the desert to blast one specific crystal. It was filled with crystals. I had to look up a guide for this mission, and after I did, there was absolutely no indication that this crystal was the right one. In other words, it's like the developers threw a needle in the haystacks and threw that haystack in a field of haystacks. At times like this, I really think we are the ones that's getting played by the developers. This is especially evident if you did not farm enough keys or Mattocks. You can essentially get stuck in caves if you run out of this, and your only hope is to travel through the entire caves looking for skeletons that drop them. And if you can't, then well, I hope you have a safe hour before entering the caves. Next up, sound. My first time playing this game, I told myself I would only play for 30 minutes, and 3 hours later, I was still playing the same game. I don't know what psychological elements are at play in this game's music, but I swear, there's something about the music that just entices me to keep playing the game, like a snake being hypnotized by a snake charmer playing the flute. With that said, the music here did not click with me. Sure, it encouraged me to keep on playing the game, but outside of the game, I would never listen to the soundtrack. Its 8-bit style of music is quaint and will remain as such. To sum up, what I love about the Mana series is their story, because despite it being a JRPG series, it doesn't always conform to the typical anime cliches that you would expect, so they always feel fresh to me, and that is evident right from this game, the start of the entire series. What's even more challenging is that due to this game's 16-bit design, there is only a limited amount of pixels on screen for the developers to tell a story, and I think they did a good job conveying that here. Combat-wise, the ultimate is a really fun mechanic that forces players to gauge whether it is better to just spam the attack button or wait until the ultimate meter is full and then release a stronger attack. However, the level design is really bad. The maps provide no directions whatsoever, and the real antagonist of this game, I would argue, is the sense of direction in this game. To add to that, you'll be exploring a lot of caves in this game, and the caves looks identical to each other, with only slight enemy varieties. A good story only warrants one playthrough. If I would have to sum up this game with one phrase, it would be inconsistent and repetitive. As such, it pains me to rate this Mana game a 5 out of 10, and that concludes my report on the game Final Fantasy Adventures. Thanks for your attention, take care.